Good evening, everyone. We are live, so welcome to your City Council meeting on an off night here, Thursday, January 19th at 6 p.m. We're going to, are we good? What's going on? Lisa, are we good? Echo. Am I echoing? Hello, hello, hello. All right, we're ready? All right, if everyone can rise with me, we will pledge to the flag, led by our city attorney, Quinn Barrow.
Put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Recording in progress.
Yes, got it. Push your button. We're good. All right. Roll call.
Councilmember Franklin?
Here.
Councilmember Haworth?
Here.
Councilmember Lesser?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery?
Here.
Mayor Napolitano?
Here. And do we need item E, approval of agenda and waiver of full reading of ordinances?
It's not necessary for tonight.
All right, we'll move on then. Move on to public comments. These are comments of 3 minutes each per person, and you can come down and speak on any subject matter within the jurisdiction of the city or the city council, including items on the agenda. If you do speak on high rows or verandas, whichever you want to call it, at this point in the meeting, then we're going to ask that you not speak 5 minutes later or however long it takes when we get to the item. So no speaking twice on the item. No 2 bites at the apple. If you speak during public participation, that's going to be it. If you want to wait and speak when we have the agenda item and after the city's presentation and the appellant's presentation, then you can speak then, but not twice. Okay? Appreciate it. 2 minutes at that time, right? Correct. 2 minutes at that time, 3 minutes of public participation. Thank you. So we'll start with public comments. So these include anything, whether it's on tonight's agenda or not. If you have something to come down and speak.
Good evening. My name is Michael Curran. I'm a 51-year resident of Manhattan Beach. And I read in the Beach Reporter that the project developer sued the city on November 2nd. And in the same month, the State Housing Agency sent a letter to the city. Both documents address the ministerial's approval and density bonus law, but don't appear to address the reason that the city council denied, or the 3-2 vote denying the project back last year for health and safety reasons affected by intense and unanswered environmental concerns. Those concerns are as follows. Number one, decades ago, Chevron acknowledged the effects of their refineries' pollution by installing covenants, conditions, and restrictions on deeds of sales of their property immediately east of the refinery between Sepulveda Boulevard and Douglas Street in El Segundo. And those prohibitions were no residential overnight. That would be single-family residences, hotels, apartments, etc. Chevron has paid millions of dollars in fines for release of nitrous oxides over the years into the South Bay air from the El Segundo project. Chevron's El Segundo refinery has historically been at the top of the South Coast AQMD's annual list of heaviest air polluters. The blast radius from the potential explosion within Chevron's refinery was articulated by Frank Chiella, who was a former battalion chief who did a lot of inspections of the refinery, and Mark Burton. My hat's off to them for inclusion in this list. The pending, I believe it's SB 2011. I know there's a 1137 that might be involved too, but I think it's 2011, which prohibits residential being within 3,200 feet of a refinery. And if memory serves, that law becomes effective in April this year. But why try to grandfather high roads in before that, given the same health and safety concerns? And I will kind of pose the same question I did to the city council at the last city council meeting I spoke at. And I will pose that question to legislatures and others. Would you want anybody in your family to be living in this project? The last item I have is that the representatives of both the state agency and the developer need to read Martin Reddish's October 10th, 2022 letter to the City Council, which invokes the due process clause of the Constitution. Mr. Reddish is senior counsel of the firm Crowell and Mooring LLP, which the last I read is willing to defend the city pro bono versus any lawsuits which result from the denial of the subject project once again. The subject project can be changed to a commercial project, no overnight residency, for which the land is currently zoned, unless the developer paid too much for the property in anticipation of a residential project approval. The 6 proposed low-income units can be incorporated in other target properties in Manhattan Beach. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay. Other speakers at this time?
Hello, Mayor and council members. I'm Gail Fortis, a 35-year resident. I'm against High Rose Project verandas as it is proposed. This will be my 9th public comment on this atrocious and reckless project. I've spoken about the imminent threat and regularity of fires and explosions at Chevron, the high potential for petroleum leakage and other ground contaminants, state law AB 2011's 3,200-foot buffer zone requirement, the lack of enough parking, 100-plus cars added to El Porto, concentrated at Rosecrans and Highland, the need for a city remanded EIR and land use attorney, transparency, opportunism, and so on. This project is a blatant disregard for residents' health, safety, and well-being. Our city desperately needs affordable housing, which this won't be. The city needs to get on board with state mandates to add housing, but this isn't the right way to do it. And now, what's going on here? I see a huge inequity that the city rehears the building application today that was already decided and voted on October 18th because of new information, but not the appellants, who are also subject to the results of the new information. Does that seem just? Something's amiss here. Please do what's right and best for the city and your residents. You voted no on October 18th. Vote no again. Thank you for listening and your consideration.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, my name is Philip Cook. I live at 128 2nd Street, and I run my business at my commercial office building in the 800 block of Manhattan Beach Boulevard. I have many problems with the High Rose based on what I've seen, read, and heard, and so do most of the residents. The developer's presentation that he looked at every possible use, commercial, residential, senior housing, entertainment, every possible use, and the only possible use he could conclude was it was a 79-unit apartment building. So I ask you, if you truly think that he did all this was done after the property was purchased? No, not at all. He's a private equity guy, which means he's a broker for helping invest rich people's money. And he did all of his homework before any money traded hands, before he bought the property. He looked at it and he said, I'm going to put the thing that gives me the best return on my money. If all that business about what he tried to put on the lot was a sales job to get the city council to conclude that the only thing that could go on there is his project, and in the size he wants to build it. For those with compassion for the homeless, do you think that 6 units out of 79, or 3.3% of all the units, was the most he could put on the property, or the least he had to put on the property to get a hall pass from Sacramento? I built my house and my office building by the building code. I respected my neighbors, I respected the building code, and I respected the city's culture and small town feel. This builder does not respect any of that. In fact, I would be surprised if he lives anywhere near Rosecrans and Highland. Finally, as an elected official, you must not throw up your hands and say, there's nothing more that we can do. Now, not to be too dramatic, but if the colonists had said that back in 1776, do you think we'd still be run by an oppressive England? Possibly. What if the civil rights movement did that? Would there still be segregated schools and restaurants? Well, we have the government we do because the majority of eligible voters do not vote and they do not write their congresspeople. So government does what government wants to do because nobody complains. Let Sacramento know that we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Tuesday night, one council member said they were concerned about crime impacting all residents and not just friends and neighbors. I hope this city council is concerned about the impact of high-ros on all Manhattan Beach residents, not just friends and neighbors. If you vote for this project, then you open the door for 80 more high-roses. I did the math. So vote this measure down. And if you're worried about spending money, think about the money we spent on the Downtown Specific project, which was totally wasted. That was over $1 million. So if you incur some legal costs, it'll be well worth it to keep our culture.
Thank you. Next up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jorge Quintero. I'm a special representative for the Carpenters Union, Local 562 in Long Beach. We represent over 4,000 members that live in the South Bay area. We're here because as the project is right now, we oppose it. There's currently no prevailing wages that offer a livable wage, that offer wage protections. Our industry is plagued with wage theft and human trafficking. This does not provide any protections for that. Also, the project does not, we urge you that you adopt a local hire provision that would allow the community of Manhattan Beach and the surrounding areas to be able to work in projects such as this. This will reduce traffic, which would in turn reduce greenhouse emissions. We urge you to please adopt a prevailing wage provision for this project. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Council. My name is Christina Reyes. I represent the Southwest Carpenters Union at a Local 562. I live no more than 5 miles away from the area, and I believe, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Take your time.
I believe that I'd be impacted by this project because I live in the area. You know, at the moment I work in Hollywood, it takes me about an hour and a half to get home from work. On a good day, on a bad day, it's about 2.5 hours. And I think it'd benefit me a lot to, you know, be very close and still have a social life to spend time with my family and friends outside of work. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is James Matthews. I am also a member of the Southwest Carpenters that out of Long Beach that covers the South Bay area. Just to add just a little bit to what was said earlier about being opposed to the project, only because we want to make sure that we have measures in place that provide the opportunity for local hire for good wages and benefits. But the biggest thing would be for the local hire. We have a great, outstanding apprenticeship program that provides opportunities for those that want to get into the trade or just to be able to work. And having that put into place in this project that's being built and have that as part of the project, it does allow the local hires, the students, kids that will be able to, who are looking for jobs, to be able to go out and reach a job because they got that local hire component. And just here in Manhattan, El Segundo, the South Bay area, those that live within a particular mile radius, that they don't have to go far out to be able to get a job. Myself, for example, I actually live in Bakersfield. When I drive all the way out here and I work at the Chevron refinery, a lot of that is because there's not a lot of work locally, and we have to go out to be able to get our jobs. I don't have no problems doing that, but a lot of people aren't able to do that. Or there's a lot of that does do that, but we want to have them to stay close to home. It helps out the city, the surrounding areas, because when they are making that money and they are enjoying that local area, that money filters back into the city. You know, it helps the community out. You know, we're not driving and spending our money out in Ontario. We're not spending our money out in the valley. It stays within the local area and helps build the community up. So it's very important that we have that put in place for the project that is being done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the time. First, I just want to say thank you so much to the first responders that have responded today in the area. I know that it's probably a hot topic for what happened nearby, not necessarily in Manhattan Beach, but appreciate all of those that are around that know kind of what happened, but thank you to that. I've spoken on the topic before. I would be grateful for your ears just for a minute again to oppose the High Rose project. I've lived in LA for about 17 years, in Manhattan Beach, El Porto in particular for about 3, but in Playa del Rey for 7, which is really interesting because you don't necessarily have the same opportunity to have people that are supporting you, right? Playa del Rey is part of LA. It's really different. Manhattan Beach, I feel like we have people that really support us. That's kind of the point. But as a mid-30s somebody in the area that I can afford, this development, I just don't know that I get it, you guys. We elected you guys. We honor you. I trust your decisions. But we've brought up some things around environmental considerations. This doesn't seem to be environmentally palatable, right? If it's affordable housing, I don't know that I get that either, because it's only a couple places. And every time my friends move out of one place into another, at least 30% increase where they're going. So why is this development going to help that, right? If it's traffic, I don't think that's it either, right? Like, we're not going to all of a sudden create a new pass-through that's going to make it easier to get through that area, because if you've ever walked that intersection, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. I do it at least twice a day. People don't look. I mean, it's scary to be a pedestrian in that area where I live and I pay taxes, and that's my community. And we give each other things, not just sugar because it's Manhattan Beach. We give each other, low-carb things, all that kind of stuff. But, I don't know. I'm just not sure what it is that we're seeking. And I think if at the end of the day that development becomes a place where there's a Starbucks on the corner or something and Two Guns, despite their overpriced coffee, I love it, if they go out of town, what do we have? Like, I don't know. I usually have speaker's notes. I don't today. I just have this yellow sheet. But I knew this was kind of my last opportunity to share that we trust you guys. We elected you for a reason, and tonight is another one of those nights. I really hope this isn't a sad night for this beautiful place I call home. But we trust you guys. So if you guys, and I'm not trying to be that way, but if you can go home and sleep with the decision you made, by golly.
Thank you. Other speakers? Want to speak now?
My name is Kathleen Spillane. I've lived here probably 40 years almost. I think I'm one of the silent majority. We've kind of been aware of what's going on, but the impact of this development, I think, is going to be very detrimental to the city. I remember coming to meetings when we were discussing sand dune, and it wasn't until a kid got hurt and the city was open to all the litigation possible that came up with a solution. I think this is going to be very dangerous. Just the environmental impact, Chevron, I think it's going to open up the city to a lot of litigation if this project goes through, because there are a lot of people like me who are going to find out about it after the fact. They're going to be pretty upset. And I just think that this city is full of lawyers, doctors, Indian chiefs. We should be able to come up with an environmental reason not to have this project. And if we're really interested in helping the homeless, let's come up with a better plan and a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other speakers? Anyone by Zoom? Oh.
Hi, Will Arvizo, 51-year resident. I've been out to the project many times, and I've stood at those 4 corners or 5 corners, whatever we want to count them there. And the traffic lights that we put in some time back, the signals and such, don't work. People have to wait 10 minutes to get across the street. We haven't even fixed that. And this building, the traffic backs up at 5 o'clock, between 3 and 5 o'clock in all directions. How are these people going to get in and out of there? I've watched the rotation factor or what's going on as far as the parkings. It's not working. The lights that were put in are not working. The light that's on Highland that was knocked down never got put back in, and it doesn't work half the time. You press the button, they're not working from there. That hasn't been cured yet. Is what's going to happen when you have, 75 more cars coming into that area there? The other factor is all the pollution, in fact, which nobody's really done this yet. You're going to first find out if there is pollution there, and then we'll put a project there. But, I mean, having residential, and what is a low-cost unit? What's the cost of a low-cost unit? I tried to find this from somebody. Nobody has told me. I mean, is it a low-cost unit going to be $3,000 a month? Because that's what it's going to range for in Manhattan Beach, at least what I think I saw on some of the paperwork. So you've got that involved. You've got a project that is really dense from that standpoint. And why did we give away all the setbacks? I mean, so you could build more? I mean, normally, you don't give away setbacks. I can't get a setback giveaway on my house. Why would this project get setback giveaways? You weren't required to do this by the state of California. This might as well just take them right out. I mean, if the setbacks can't be taken back, then you're going to have to build less units. But still, the fact is, there's really not going to be low-class or low-cost housing there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Other speakers at this time? All right. Zoom. Who's that? Mitchell?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and the members for the opportunity to speak. I'm a 20-year resident of Manhattan Beach. Fully support the decision the council made in October to deny the Highways project. And I appreciate the fact that it was based on a sound and defensible position around health and safety concerns related to building next to an active oil refinery. There's no shortage hard evidence and argument out there to support the position, including the danger from the regular burn-offs and all too frequent multi-alarm fires that occur at the refinery, including a major one that occurred in December right next to the Highways location. You can go on Nextdoor and actually see the video. It is frightening and is literally adjacent to the project location. AQMD reports going back decades listing the refinery as a major, if not the biggest polluter in the state. Inadequate studies conducted related to potential underground hazards at the Highways site. I question if those studies that have been done are still valid. Federal constitutional arguments related to due process around this project. Social justice arguments around putting low-income housing next to a refinery, which the state has now formally recognized by putting in the law AB 2011, which provides for discretionary review of those projects within 3,200 feet of a refinery. Again, I realize the law was put into place after the fact, but it shows that we are fully aligned, at least morally and ethically, with the state on these issues. And I find it absurd that the same groups, such as HCD and YIMBY, that have sent the city ill-informed, threatening letters, are the same groups that unanimously supported AB 2011. So I urge the city to stand by its decision, and if it hasn't done so, hire a qualified land use legal expert that can help defend our city and separate fact from fiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Evan?
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I really just have 2 points following upon some of the speakers that have spoken earlier. The first of this is we would certainly encourage the city to basically get the resources that it needs to defend the city. We have an existential threat to the way the health and safety of our citizens, as well as just to the way our life, that all of you guys are supposed to protect the mission statement of the city. And you hear a lot about the cost. And Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Lesser, you guys are both very experienced lawyers. You hear these numbers about millions of dollars of litigation. You guys are brilliant. You know that litigation is like a highway. There are exits off the highway, and you stage things out. So, developers gaslighting the amounts it's going to cost, that's really probably fairly short-sighted. And I noted from the meeting on Tuesday that you guys were talking about spending $300,000 on a crosswalk, which is great. But what's the value of defending the health and safety of our residents, as well as just the way of life here in Manhattan Beach? I just asked you to basically make sure you have the resources. There was an earlier speaker that talked about our law firm, Kroll & Mooring's willingness to assist. We still are. I've spoken to the city attorney, and he knows that there can be positional conflicts between our representation of the city in terms of the residents and the residents through Chill to Build. And so, but we're still willing to cooperate to the extent we can. But you have an incredible population that are against this. If this goes the wrong way, we are anticipating a lot of support. And so we just ask you to make the right decision, stand by the decision, stand by your residents. Thank you.
Thank you. No further Zoom? Okay. Anyone else here in the audience for public participation? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to, consideration of an application for precise development plan. So you know why we're here. In fact, city attorney has given me a script. It says, number 1, Mayor, we are here tonight to consider the High Rose project again. First, are there any council comments? Does anyone want to make comments to start with? I don't know why we're doing comments instead of questions, but comments. Councilmember Lesser.
I do. As the new kid on the block, I suppose, I need to make a statement, and that is, I have reviewed the record in this item, which includes roughly 2,000 pages of printed documents that have been printed out for me, and I've reviewed, and they're in these notebooks, and watched the videos of all of the prior proceedings, all the videos. The record includes the staff reports, the appeals, the letters from the applicant and appellants, hundreds of emails for and against the project. I will listen to the public statements tonight before reaching a decision. But I am fully informed, comfortable to participate in tonight's proceedings, and able to make a decision once all the testimony has been made.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
Thank you, Mayor. So as the public may be aware, I voted no on this project back in October. I was candid with my concerns about the project's potential effect on the city's character and our residents' quality of life and overreach by the state. Since that time, the applicant has sued the city, and HCD sent a notice of violation. I come into this proceeding with an open mind. Accordingly, I have not made up my mind on the project. I intend to listen objectively to all parties and the public before making up my mind and making any determination only after we receive tonight's input. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Haworth.
Okay, me too. I, like Councilmember Lesser, I want to assure the community that I have read, mine are underneath my desk, the 2,000 plus pages documentation, which includes hundreds of emails starting back in August. I've also watched at the time all the city council meetings and have since rewatched the ones that I was not a part of. I have met with, well, during the campaign and until this weekend, I've met with residents, both for and opposed to the project. I've read the staff reports, as I said, thousands of emails. And I too will want to hear further public comment later tonight, the staff report, and the comments by my colleagues. And then I will be ready to make an informed decision. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery, anything from you at this time?
Nothing new from me, Your Honor. I appreciate that.
Okay. I didn't get that memo, so we'll continue on. All right, we have a staff presentation. And then before we go to the staff presentation, I also know that we're going to reiterate what we said at the prior meetings. We appreciate that this project has created a lot of passion out there on both sides. We hope that you respect each other and respect the process tonight. We ask that you not applaud or boo or make any gestures that would be both for or against, because that can intimidate speakers. We want everyone to feel that they can come down here and speak freely, whether they're for or against the project, and that's what this respect is for here. And so we ask that you respect the process and each other, and refrain from any applause or booing or any gestures that might, again, be construed for what they are or misconstrued. We appreciate that. Again, everyone here, Councilmember Franklin, Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery, myself have been through this. Our new council members have been brought up to speed on everything. This comes with the territory. This is part of the job, making these decisions. And we hope you understand that everyone's going to make their best informed decision tonight. With that, I'll turn it back over to staff.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. At this time, I will turn it over to Associate Planner Ted Faturos to present the staff report this evening.
Good evening, Mayor Napolitano and members of the City Council. My name is Ted Faturos, and I'm here to present for your consideration an application for a 79-unit housing project located at 401 Rosecrans Avenue and 3770 Highland Avenue. In this presentation, I'll be providing a timeline of the project as well as a project overview with details of the proposed building. Starting with a timeline of how we got here today, on March 4th, 2021, the applicant applied for a precise development plan and associated entitlements. On January 6th of 2022, the project application was deemed complete, and in late March 2022, the Community Development Director approved the project. In April of 2022, 4 independent appeals of the director's decision were submitted, and on June 8th, 2022, the Planning Commission considered those appeals and unanimously affirmed the director's decision and approved the project. Subsequent to the Planning Commission's decision, 5 independent appeals were filed, appealing that decision to the City Council. On August 16th, 2022, the City Council considered those appeals, and at a subsequent meeting on October 18th, 2022, the City Council upheld those appeals and the project was denied. On November 28th, 2022, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD, served a notice of violation to the city, asserting that the denial violated the Housing Accountability Act and state density bonus law. The project under consideration again this evening is a density bonus project that proposes 79-unit multifamily apartment building. For the benefit of the current council, I'll review some of the project details as well as the regulations that the project was reviewed under. The site where the project is proposed is currently composed of two parcels, 401 Rosecrans Avenue and 3770 Highland Avenue. The applicant proposes to merge those lots through a tentative parcel map. And the applicant has basically applied for a precise development plan, a PDP. Precise development plans are intended to encourage the development of affordable housing through a streamlined permitting process. That means the process is administrative and non-discretionary in nature. The applicant is also utilizing both state and local density bonus law. And the concept of the density bonus law is that if a developer sets aside a certain percentage of the units as affordable housing, the developer is allowed to build more units than what the code would allow otherwise, in exchange for those affordable units. And density bonus law is both the state law and has been part of the city's local regulations since 2013. Moving on to some of the project details, the applicant is proposing the demolition of the existing structures and the construction of a new 96,217 square foot multifamily structure. The proposed building contains 79 units, including 6 units that are set aside for very low income residents. Vehicular access to the site is from Rosecrans Avenue, and the building at its tallest point is 4 stories, and the building ranges between 37 feet and 50 feet in height, measured from the average grade as required by the code. There is a mix of studios, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms at the as part of the building, and the building also includes a subterranean parking garage. Some details on the parking. The applicant is proposing 127 parking spaces, which include 114 standard size spaces, which includes 48 tandem spaces and 13 compact spaces. The minimum required parking under state law is 103 parking spaces, so the applicant is providing more parking than required under state law. The applicant is also providing 7 motorcycle spaces and 27 bicycle parking spaces. The project qualifies for waivers and concessions, which are spelled out in density bonus law. A waiver is when the developer gets to not follow a development standard, because following the development standard would create a physical limitation on the building from reaching the density allowed under the density bonus law. The applicant is also entitled to a concession, or 2 concessions, although the applicant is only requesting 1. And a concession under density bonus law is when following the development standard would create a financial limitation on the structure, or on the project, and prevent the project from being built. So the applicant is proposing 5 waivers as afforded to them by state density bonus law. They are for the buildable floor area, for the height, the number of stories, the side yard setback for the electrical transformer, not for the entire building, and also for the rear and side yard setback requirements for portions of the structure that are over 24 feet in height. The applicant is requesting 1 concession, and that's for the maximum wall and fence height within the setbacks. This is a view of the project from Rosecrans Avenue facing northwest. As you can see, the project Rosecrans slopes down when you go from east to west, and the building emerges from the site as the grade goes down. So on the eastern side, what you see is a taller one-story portion of the structure, and as you go west, you see more of the stories emerge. The massing of the building is mostly away from Rosecrans Avenue, as the site really borders the border between Manhattan Beach and El Segundo. So most of the massing is away from Rosecrans on that border. This is a view kind of in the center of the project facing northeast. In the middle there, what you can see is that vehicular access here to the subterranean garage. And again, you'll notice from this slide that the massing is pulled mostly away from Rosecrans Avenue. This is the view from Rosecrans Avenue facing east. I should point out that this rendering doesn't show the surrounding buildings. So in front of the building is the city's parking structure, which is at the corner of Highland and Rosecrans. And also in this area here is a commercial and a residential building that partially obscure the structure. So in 1992 and 2013, respectively, the city conducted CEQA review and adopted negative declarations on the zoning implementation program that allowed for mixed-use zoning on the subject site and the subsequent housing element policies that allowed for ministerial review of density bonus projects. Pursuant to CEQA, environmental review does not apply to ministerial projects. Therefore, CEQA environmental review is not required for this project. Although not required, the applicant did submit to the city, and the city did review and concur with the findings of a trip generation study for the proposed project and a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment that concluded that there are no conditions on the site that pose a threat to the environment and/or human health.
So can you go over why it's a ministerial project, though?
Sure. Going back to the nature of the project is a density bonus project, which means it incorporates affordable housing. Under our local coastal program, which governs the site, the local coastal program specifically says that affordable housing projects that incorporate density bonus a density bonus are subject to ministerial non-discretionary review. So the LCP makes it very clear that those type of projects, which is this, are not discretionary in review, but are ministerial.
How long has that been in place?
Since 2013.
Okay, thank you.
There's been a tremendous amount of public outreach for this project over the last several months. Specifically for tonight, a notice was mailed out on January 10th to residents within 100 feet of the site. An ad was placed in the Beach Reporter, which ran in last week's Beach Reporter. And our website, or on the city's website, there is a dedicated page for the High Rose project, which includes all public comment, every staff report, both from the City Council and the Planning Commission, and a very long list of frequently asked questions that try to explain to the public in layman's terms what the project is, the process for review, etc. In addition, the city has maintained an interested parties email list that has over 730 email addresses in that list. Everyone on that list was notified of tonight's City Council meeting and was also given a link to the staff report and information on how to make a public comment. Since the publication of the agenda and the staff report last week, I do believe we have received some public comment as well, which I believe has been entered into the record. With that, staff recommends that the City Council adopt the resolution affirming the Planning Commission's decision and approve the project. And with that, I will turn it over to Acting Director Mirzakanian.
Thank you for that presentation, Ted. Council members, I did want to quickly announce for the record that staff released a supplemental staff report at approximately 5:15 this evening. It has been entered into the record and made available for public review. The supplemental staff report, it essentially reiterates that staff reviewed all the public comment that was received for this evening, and we identified a singular comment that we felt had not been specifically addressed in previous staff reports, and we wanted to take an opportunity to address that comment, and that was a comment that stated, and I quote, the project is next to Chevron Refinery, on record as one of the biggest polluters in the state. And to address this statement, we wanted to just remind the public and the council the limitations that are applicable to the decision making for a housing development project, specifically as it is provided by the California Housing Accountability Act, which states that the city shall not disapprove a housing development project unless it makes written findings based upon a preponderance of evidence in the record that the housing development project, as proposed, would have a specific adverse impact upon public health and safety, and there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact. Accordingly, under the Housing Accountability Act and the stringent standard of the Housing Accountability Act, the city shall not disapprove the project unless the project itself has a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact made upon the public health or safety. To date, no such adverse impact arising from the project has been identified by the appellants or the public, and the proximity to Chevron is not considered a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact resulting from the construction or operation of the project itself. Additionally, we reiterated in the memorandum that there have been environmental site assessments performed by the property owner and the applicant on the project site. There was a phase 1 and a phase 2, which Ted just mentioned in his staff report, and that included 9 borings, 21 soil samples, multiple soil vapor samples, and again, the assessments concluded that there was no significant environmental concern to the site at this time. We also took the opportunity to reiterate that any project on this site would have to comply with federal, state, local, environmental, and public health regulations prior to and during demolition, excavation, and construction of any project. And those are the rules that apply to all projects, it includes certain regulations that they have to meet for SCA QMD and other local and state regulators. So they would continue to be subject to this just as any project in the city would. And that is the summary of the report that was released this afternoon. Ted and I are both available for questions.
Okay. Questions from council? Councilmember Haworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Either one of you. This is a follow-up to the question that the mayor asked about. At what point did it become ministerial, or at what point did that, and you mentioned the 2013, I think was the general plan update, and wasn't that necessary? That wasn't just something the council or staff decided. It was imposed as far as complying with state law or in order to get our general plan approved.
That is correct. In 2013, the city was working on the 4th cycle housing element, and we were late to get that adopted and certified, and the 5th cycle came shortly after that. But it was during the fourth cycle housing element where this idea of the precise development plan as a tool to streamline processes and lift any impediments from the potential of having multifamily housing that includes affordable housing built within the city. And that was when it was initially introduced.
But it wasn't, you say the idea was introduced or the plan was created. It wasn't created by our planning department. It was created by housing authorities, state law.
The effort of the housing element update is driven by state law, as you know, and the staff has to cooperate with HCD and the requests. And the ultimate goal, just like how we're in the process of today, is to be able to address the needs and the requirements of the state by demonstrating how the city would lift any impediments to housing production. And as a result of that effort, that policy was introduced into our housing element.
Other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lesser?
Mr. City Attorney, I have some questions for you. A member of the public asked in her comment, what has changed since October 18th, 2022, when the prior council made the decision it did? I think many people are asking that same question. How would you articulate what has been the change of circumstances?
Well, the two biggest changes were number one is the lawsuit where the applicant is seeking $50 million in damages. And then, but even more importantly than that, although that's a big number, is the notice of violation by HCD. HCD served a notice of violation on the city that said if you don't rescind the prior resolution and approve this project, they're going to contact the Attorney General, and it's actually quoted in the staff report what HCD said, but they said this is illegal. There is no evidence to support the decision.
So let's play that out, because I think many are wanting the council to stand strong and defend that earlier position. What would be the next step with that? What if we say we've already decided, we stick to our earlier decision?
Well, we have to defend the lawsuit. We've been threatened. In fact, another letter came in today from housing advocacy groups that they'll file 3 separate lawsuits. The consequences of that, and it's spelled out in the staff report, is if HCD is correct and the housing advocacy groups are correct, that this violated what's known as the HAA, which is the Housing Accountability Act. They're entitled to their attorney's fees. That's one of the consequences. 2, a court can order that the city approve the project within 60 days. And number 2, and then at least, well, there's more, but the other significant one is the court could actually approve the project on its own.
I guess the larger question that I have as it relates to CEQA and environmental safety is the role of a city when a project is proposed under the sort of legal template that we have here at an inherently unsafe location. What is the role of the city then, to the extent it lacks discretion? What role does it have to seek to prevent what appears to be an inherently unsafe project?
Well, so I would not describe this property as inherently unsafe. In fact, they've done 2 different, well, they've done the phase 1 and the phase 2 and found no condition, as pointed out in the staff report and in the record. For the benefit of the public, I think most of the public understands this after watching these proceedings. But before someone buys a property, especially if it's close to an oil refinery, but it's a good idea for any time you buy property in Southern California, you do a phase 1 and a phase 2 to see if there's any subsurface problems with that site. Because you don't want to buy a property, spend whatever they spent on this property, and then start excavating and then find out it's a Superfund site. So they did the phase 2. They found absolutely nothing. It was this was before they bought the property. There was actually, I think, 2 phase 1s, and so they did their analysis, their due diligence before they bought this property. And some people have said, well, that's a little bit dated. I think the last one was in 2020, but I'm not sure what the date is. There's no impact from Chevron that has somehow migrated after that phase 2. But the most important part about this, if there is, during construction and excavation, there's, I'm not going to count, but I'm not going to say countless either because someone will be able to count them, but there's several environmental protections during construction. So if they find something that the phase 2 didn't find, the construction stops.
And which entities would oversee that, I guess?
Well,
that's the piece
it's in the staff report. I think there's more than just, it's the county, there's 2 or 3 different groups. I think federal, I'm not even sure about that, but it's in the staff report.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Haworth?
Thank you. I also have a question for you, Mr. City Attorney, and it was spurred by a comment that was made tonight that we would be open to litigation because of the environmental impact that could happen if something like, if they hit something that, methane, or I don't know, what it would be, that we would be on the hook. It was also, I think, that they were saying that if there were impacts with Chevron, but that we would be on the hook for that. Could you explain that or answer that?
Yes, and I'm glad you answered that question because this issue was addressed at the prior proceedings. But the city has immunity under the government code for issuing building permits and entitlements. So in other words, let's say the city issues a building permit for some site, but this is a hypothetical, that's actually contaminated, and they start building, and somehow it keeps getting built, and after all the environmental protections during construction, and people start getting sick. We have immunity from that. We're immunized from lawsuits. And a lot of times it comes up in landslide cases as well, but it's a clear immunity for the issuance of a building permit or land use entitlement.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, thank you. Interim Director, so the memo that you distributed today, it talked about that if there is something wrong, if during the construction process they do find contaminants and things like that, it seemed to me, and I think you even mentioned it in here, but I think for my benefit and others, is what would that look like? I mean, a lot of us here lived through Metlocks and the remediation when lead was found, in the soil. What would that look like if if they discovered a contaminant, similar type of contaminant?
Sure. Just as the city attorney just described, what happens in situations like this is they're constantly testing on site. And if at any point there is an unexpected result and something is found, they immediately have to halt construction until there's further investigation conducted. And if there's something that needs to be addressed, that would have to be addressed before progressing any further in the construction. A good example of this is sometimes you'll have projects on sites that have interest from the Native American tribes, and they'll want either a monitor on site or there'll be a condition of approval, for example, that if something were to be uncovered on that site, you'd have to halt construction until there's some investigation. They'll send a specialist out. They'll see if, in fact, that is an artifact that is of concern, and everything will halt unless and until there's clearance to move forward. And it's a similar situation with environmental hazards.
Okay. And we see around town And in fact, just right across Highland in El Porto, there's vents coming up from the sidewalk, I guess. You know, there's vents, and there's vents on the property now. What are those, and are they just a precaution, or was something found and it's venting?
I cannot definitively say what's happening on those other properties. I do know examples, not specifically the ones you're talking about, but in other areas in Southern California of projects that are required to build methane vents into the project. The Grove is a good example of this. There was methane on the Grove site, and it's right next to the La Brea tar pits. And they did have to build methane vents, which emits from the soil through the building and out. On this particular site, I'm not sure that would be necessary. We have not found any evidence of that as to date. And I also wouldn't be able to confirm or deny whether the vents that you're describing are methane vents or something else.
Okay. And how many borings were taken? The
9.
site is what is the lot combined? Is it? Did I read once it was like 20,000 square feet? Or
it's 45, 46, 47,000 around.
1,000. Okay, so that's easy.
About an acre.
Because it's 42 some odd feet in an or 42,000 feet in an acre. Wait, my math is wrong, or my memory. How many acres?
43,560.
So it's how many acres?
Approximately an acre.
Approximately an acre. Okay. So in that 40 some odd thousand square feet, how many borings were taken?
9.
9.
Mm-hmm.
And the borings are approximately 6 inches, 9 inches, 4 inches?
More than that. I don't know definitively right now. We'll have to take a look at the environmental assessment to confirm the width of the boring holes.
Okay. And were they spread out?
Yes.
When they were taken?
Yes, that's how it's described.
So I'm just trying to picture, as the construction goes along, the soil's tested, comes to a halt because they find some contaminant. What if it's, really kind of major, and what are the options for the developer at that point? I mean, obviously they have to pay for, the mitigation. What if it just exceeds their ability to, exceeds their budget, and they just say, hey, we really can't go through with this? I mean, we can't finish this.
It is, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but again, it is their responsibility entirely to address those situations.
Okay. All right.
And just, which is a good segue, the groups, I started writing down the different groups, and it's the EPA, both state and federal EPA, the Water Board, the AQMD, and the State Attorney General. So you've got a lot of federal and state agencies that are monitoring, and if they find something, they have to report it immediately. And this has happened, it's not just this site, of course. This happens, and they have to stop construction and report it, and then the county comes and other groups come and with their hazmat suits and everything else.
It cannot remain unaddressed, essentially.
Right. Okay. That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I follow up on something just to clarify? Gosh.
Councilmember Howard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for acknowledging the button. Just to follow up, so the owner or the developer's responsible, but what if they decide to abandon the project? Are they still responsible for mitigating the environmental damage?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did have one additional question for City Attorney Barrow. During the hearings, we kind of approached the subject of short-term rentals. And even though it's in the coastal zone, we discussed that. And for me, the concern was the developer is a hotel developer. And there's a trend in the industry now that they either build apartment buildings or they take over apartment buildings, and you can run them as basically a short-term rental hotel. And we discussed putting a covenant on both the affordable housing agreement, or either on the land or on the title. So it's been a couple of months, and I know you looked into it. You had determined that the state would not allow short-term rentals either by the operator or by the tenants that might be there, and I just want to make sure that that is still the case.
Yeah, definitely, because I cannot imagine with the strong statement the state has made about how short-term rentals take away housing, needed housing, and how cities can develop their own policies with respect to ADUs, for instance. And SB 9, I don't think the city even has that discretion. If people take advantage of SB 9, they cannot rent that out under state law on a short-term basis. And so it would be, so the covenant's going to be, yeah, if the council decides to approve this project, there will be a covenant that restricts all 79 units from being used on a short-term basis. And it's going to be there. I mean, there's no question in my mind. And I can just, you know, if the developer, I'm not saying this developer would do this, but if they, on any type of housing project, HCD would be like the first one coming in, and the Attorney General as well. You got concessions and waivers because of your providing housing. And so that's contrary to all the, let's call them the state housing crisis acts, like the HAA and others.
And that would apply, so that would be them as an operator if they were operating it, but you know, they had mentioned that they might have a management company doing it. It would apply to them, and it would apply to the individual tenants. So if somebody rented one of those units, they could not set that unit up as a short-term rental.
It's a good analogy is the affordable units. The affordable units have to be affordable. You can't have someone come in and pay whatever, you know, they meets the criteria and then turn around and sublease it to someone at market rate.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions at this time? Hearing none.
Mayor, before we go, I just wanted to add two things about, first about the notice, because Ted mentioned that all the additional notice that was provided on this project, but including the email blast that went to, 700 people? That included the applicant and the appellant. That went out 10 days ago. That went out on the 9th. And so that was just additional notice. The city has gone way beyond what's required under the law to notify the public about this project and this hearing.
Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on to my next script point here, number 5. If the applicant and appellants are here, I would like to provide them each with 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes to speak, with the applicant first and then the appellants. So is there the applicant or a representative of the applicant here and wants to speak? Come on down. You have up to 10 minutes once the clock starts.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Michael Schonefeld on behalf of High Rose El Porto LLC. We did not come prepared for a presentation. We're here to observe. This is sort of a unique situation that, frankly, is a first in my career. We're currently in court right now on the denial, and we're just sort of ascertaining what the outcome of this evening means for that litigation and what the City Council is going to do. But since I am here, I might as well incorporate by reference to the extent I even need to all of the material written and otherwise that we've already presented to the City Council up to this time. And with that, we're, again, just on hand. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Are any of the appellants here? The appellants are here. Come on down. You're going to have up to 10 minutes to speak. It's up to you. We have special time limits for the applicant and the appellants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As you know, that's part of the process.
Good morning, Honored Council members.
When you look at this, there's a number of things that need to be clarified. There's no doubt that your review process is ministerial. That's the changes that were made back in 2017 have been in existence. And that was really trying to solve the problem of conditional use permits. So what would happen is an applicant for low-income housing would file an application, they'd process that application, it would go through a CEQA environmental impact review, there would be identified significant impacts, and those would all be mitigated, and then it would come to council, and they denied the project. And the state got tired of that. They got sick and tired of it. They've made amendments to the Housing Accountability Act and the state bonus law over the years, and cities kept on denying it. So they said, you know what? You're not going to have that discretionary use anymore. You can't do that. The conditional use permit, that discretion you had, we're taking it away from you. But the process is the same. When an application comes, you have to do an environmental assessment, and that's CEQA, with an environmental impact report. And if in fact you identify significant impacts and they're all mitigated, you don't have any discretion anymore. You have to approve it. However, in those rare instances where those significant impacts are not mitigated, then your obligation now is to have findings. Document that and provide notice to the developer. And the legislative history recognizes that's going to be very rare. So they think they've solved the problem. But you have discretion. And let's be clear, what's changed between now and October 16th are two things. The state's HCD notified you, you didn't make the findings. What they're really saying is you didn't comply with CEQA and go through the process. The process the mayor used at the time, because we were uncertain of what it was in great compliance with administrative law in California. You made the finding as the record supported. We're saying, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about those findings. And if you look at the language in the statutes, it graphs, doesn't copy, graphs the concept and the language in the environmental review process. Do you think for 1 second, right now you're standing here, do you think this California legislature intended for low-income housing projects and residents of color and disadvantage to not have the protections of the California Environmental Act and to disband the environmental impact review process? There's no way in God's green earth they intended that. And you can see that. You've got discretion. And people can keep on conflating with, wait a second, there's no environmental review required because this is a ministerial review. Review has nothing to do with it. Is it a ministerial project or discretionary project? Those are clearly defined items in the law. And it's clearly discretionary because both state laws allow you to exercise discretion. And if you can exercise discretion, it's a discretionary project. And under the law, the regulations and case law also, if you look at the magnitude and scope of this, you can clearly see there's going to be some type of environmental impact. That alone disqualifies it from being ministerial. So if you look at all the cases, back to Friends of Westwood, other ones, they'll clearly state that this is a discretionary project. And as such, it's subject to CEQA in the environmental impact review process. It's indispensable. There is no way that this legislature, which is a champion of environmental justice, would abrogate and say, you know what? I'm sorry. Residents of low-income facilities, people of color and disadvantage, we're not going to protect you. We're not going to give you those protections. You're on your own. Yet, if this project was for wealthy people, you can have those protections. That's just absurd. That is just so absurd, it's unbelievable. Now let's talk about litigation. If you, in fact, I don't think you could deny this project tonight because you haven't complied with CEQA. I really don't think you have to comply with CEQA. The best alternative is to remand this project and do it right. Otherwise, you're going to get sued again. And it's going to be a simple lawsuit because the judges that deal with these type of writs and mandates are experts on CEQA. They're going to look at it right away, and they're not going to care less about the review. That's not in contention. Everyone knows the review is ministerial. They're going to look and say, is this a ministerial project or a discretionary project? And they've got the experience to know right away it's discretionary. under the law, under the regulations, and just good common sense. Your tonight decision is so vitally important, not to this city and future projects, all the low-income had projects that we could see in the future, and there's going to be no protections by CEQA. That's going to have impact throughout California. I just don't see that as being a reasonable interpretation under anything. You can conflate the two and confuse people and obfuscate, but ministerial review process does not make it a ministerial project. It's quite simple. And if you look at this particular, I can't think of an area that is screaming out for an environmental review process where you can actually identify impacts, environmental safety, and say, are these significant? And then mitigate them. You've got one of the most challenging locations in the city. Environmental challenge, safety challenges. That's just obvious. You've got a natural gas line out front. You've got crude oil lines underneath. You've got a major electrical wires there. And it's downslope from a refinery. Not only that, you have crude oil tanks there. And you know what's going to happen there if there's a fire. Look how many fires we've had recently. Shouldn't that be studied under CEQA? Shouldn't it be looked as it's significant? Should there be any risk? If you look at the statutes of CEQA, CEQA has been in place for a long time. And when the legislature passes a statute, if they want to exempt it from CEQA, they say it. Low-income housing projects are now exempt from CEQA, which you would have seen. But you didn't see that at all, anywhere. Are there housing projects that are subject to streamlined, low-income housing projects is streamlined? Environmental impact review? Yes, it's right there in the code. But here's what's happening. You can't get myopic. You can't look at one regulation that says, here's the definition of ministerial project, and we're going to say, okay, review means, and that's it. You've got to look at everything comprehensively at all those housing statutes. And it's real clear. They certain times exempt from CEQA certain projects, and they'll say it. They didn't say that regarding low-income housing projects. That's a total misinterpretation of the ministerial project definition. They're taking that and they're conflating it. And you have a duty to protect those residents. Your number one duty as a city council is protect the safety of our residents, keep them safe. And that's particularly true in all projects. And you do so by following CEQA. In this instance, I can't think of a project that needs more of an environmental impact review process. So it's a fundamental flaw to say that this is a ministerial project. It's not at all. It's not even close. I think the smart decision is to remand it and make sure you do what the legislator contemplated. So you'll have the information. You'll have the study to say, are certain things significant or not? And can they be mitigated? And make no mistake about it, if you go through it and they're all mitigated, then you don't have discretion at all. Then you have to approve it. That's how the scheme is set up. And you've got to get it right because it's got so much significance as a precedent, not only to our city, but everywhere. And if there is litigation or writ of mandate, and you didn't follow that, you watch how that litigation might shape out. Because every city is going to be interested in it. Every city, every environmental group might join in. They'll all have an interest in that. Because nobody in this state wants that to be the rule of law, that guess what? Low-income housing projects and people of color and disadvantage don't get the protections of CEQA. That'd be frightening for the state of California. That's just not what the legislature intended at all. Look at there were 11 bills passed in 2017. Look at them all. They'll tell you exactly what they intended to do. And that's get rid of the conditional use permit process and that discretion once it comes to you. It wasn't to get rid of CEQA. You don't see that anywhere. And anytime there is something that they want to exempt from CEQA, they'll say it. And you don't see it in any of these laws, low-income housing laws. CEQA, these projects are now exempt from CEQA. You don't see that anywhere in those laws and statutes. You don't see it in CEQA. And that's because there's a gross misinterpretation of ministerial project. There's a conflating of ministerial review process and ministerial project. I think it would be prudent to send this back and remand for this council and for those residents that live there and for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there other appellants here in the audience? Do we have any appellants on Zoom that we know of?
Ed McPherson is on there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ed? Oh, no,
It's
I'm thinking of
Dawn.
Don.
Dawn's the,
Yeah. I don't think he is.
Do we know if there's any other appellants of?
Who the appellants are?
We saw Ron Shandell, but she said he didn't raise his hand.
Is he's on Zoom? Yeah,
Also,
let's do it.
this is the opportunity for the appellants, and there's also members of the public. And so if there's no other appellant that wants to speak at this time, then open it up to the public.
Do we have any, did Mr. Schindel raise his hand?
Okay, he has now.
Okay. Mr. Schindel, are you there? Ron? Is he muted? He's unmuted. Okay, but he raised his hand.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Schindel, are you there? Well, all right, we'll move on then and come back to him if he wants to take advantage of that 10 minutes later. All right, then we will open it up to the public again. At this time, if any of the appellants raise their hand or want to speak, then we'll do that at that time. In the meantime, we will go with the public and public participation. Councilmember Haworth, did you have a question?
just a question on the process. If we had follow-up questions for the city attorney based on the appellant's comments, should we wait till after public
Yes.
comment? Okay, thank you.
So we'll start with the public. 2 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is John Dumbacher, and I live on 44th Street. I kindly request that you vote no on High Rose. The project is a direct attack on our small beach town character. The excessive scale, the increase in traffic, possible environmental issues, in turning our beautiful city into Redondo Beach. Let's send a loud message to developers that if you aren't going to improve our community, don't even apply. Let's also show developers that the city will not be intimidated just because the developer did not get the answer they wanted. I asked the simple question of why? Why anyone on the council could say yes. Please reread and reflect on the council's mission statement, quote, preserving our small beach town character and enhancing the quality of life for residents. Does this project meet this criteria? Okay, that's problem one. What is the benefit to Manhattan Beach and its residents from this project? Okay, that's problem number two. Please vote no and save our town from looking like Redondo Beach. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Napolitano and council members. Marie Colmy, longtime member, city resident, and have been to the council meetings often. I'm against the project. I just wanted to say, you know, I live at the bottom of Highland and Rosecrans. I am impacted by that intersection every day of my life. I can't see how this project would not significantly impact our city, that intersection, ingress and egress, everything about our entire city, not just that intersection. But we've been through a lot of issues on Ocean Drive and coming down Highland, speed limits, parking, you know, lanes of traffic. And this, we can't handle any more, in my mind, any more density, any more traffic, any more impact down there. I think it needs to be studied. And I would question anything that was done during the pandemic because that is not a realistic view of any kind of impact when everybody was at home, no one was traveling around, people weren't going to work, people weren't coming in and out of the community. So I think it has to be reviewed. But I just want to say, just at a personal, common sense level, this is a significant impact, one that I don't think the city can bear. And I'd say don't be bullied and stand up and maintain what is important and what makes Manhattan Beach, Manhattan Beach. I mean, that's what your job is in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you do plan on speaking and you haven't spoken before, come on down to these seats here. Keep things going.
Hi, Liz Griggs. I live at the North End and longtime resident here in Manhattan Beach. And I do really, honestly, Mayor, City Council members, appreciate all the hard work and dedication that you put into this. And we do have a history with the City Council, and you guys, I know you do your work, you do your research, and you understand that you're good stewards of our community and do what's in the best interest of the community. And we know it's not easy, and when you have to look at all the best interest of what's there for the city, community, and the overall well-being of those who live within the city. And you do the right thing, you do your research, and you have to make educated decisions, and we know that it's tough. We know that you have to comply with law, legal issues, but you also have to do what's best for the community, the residents that live in the community. And based on your history, I know that the city is not afraid to put up a fight. I've spent many hours in here going through planning commission meetings and city council meetings, and there has to be compromise, and there are ways to do it. And I know that in the past, the city council has done a good job in representing the community's interest. So I strongly encourage you to stand your ground. I do think that the memo that the city published, the supplemental memo, if you look on the back page of the paragraph here, lines 3 to 5, it does let you know that you do have responsibilities and you have options to follow CEQA, and I strongly recommend you do that because I do live at the North End, and I don't live 100 feet from the project, maybe 100 yards from the project. I can see the project when I walk out my front door, and I drive OMA. And based on the rendering that I saw, the egress from that project will dump onto OMA and Rosecrans, which is already a very, very busy intersection, and it would not be responsible of the city council or the mayor to approve this project without requiring a proper environmental study. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Council. My name is Patrick Sharpless, and I oppose the project. I'm from Redondo Beach, so the comments are I can respect that. But I'm really concerned. I came into this late. I didn't really look into this very carefully for very long until recently, in the last few days. And what I'm finding is very troubling, and I don't have much time, so I want to race through it. The Housing Accountability Act and the State Density Bonus Law, they require those written findings when you have a qualifying project. But technically, this project went through the review process. It got appealed to the council, and it got denied by the council. So that project wasn't a qualifying project, in my view. So right away, you've got that protection from those threats that are being made by the state agencies. And then, notwithstanding the preliminary findings of the Community Development Director and the Planning Commission, this project is not a qualifying project. The former city council properly overruled the staff and disapproved the project. And in regards to the housing element, the streamlining review process is for the project's design, not for the preliminary matters like SEQA review. So that the housing element aspect of this analysis wouldn't be applicable for exempting from SEQA review. And the determination that this is a ministerial project is misguided. That the appellant was right. This is not a ministerial project. This project is, CEQA defines it. It defines it, and when you look at the last section in that, last subpart in that section, it specifically says anything where it has a discretionary decision and a ministerial aspect component to it, it's discretionary. It has to be treated as discretionary. So that's part of the problem. They treat it as ministerial, and it's not. And then also, CEQA, let's see, I already talked about that. The local coastal program, A84010, it says that, it doesn't say what is being represented by staff. It says that it shall be eligible for administrative
Thank you, Mr.
non-discretionary. Not eligible doesn't mean.
Thank you.
Man, my comments were submitted earlier. So.
All right, we understand. We get emails even from Redondo.
You do?
Filter was off.
Hello again. You already know what I've said many times. You've read everything, you've heard everything. But I'm here right now on behalf of Andrew Ryan, that he was not informed there was an opportunity to comment tonight. He was one of the appellants. He has a conflict as a consequence. So we submit this as our statement of not receiving fair notice, notwithstanding the self-serving statements made tonight. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Other speakers here in the audience? 2 minutes, who haven't spoken already? Okay, we'll go to Zoom. Ed?
Thank you very much. I've been a resident of Manhattan Beach for 40 years, and I'm speaking tonight less as a resident, more as a lawyer, and I'll do kind of a big picture thing. I'm not as eloquent or as knowledgeable in the specifics as Mr. Burton was, but let me start it by this. In June, the Supreme Court reversed Roe versus Wade. Everybody screamed, just because the Supreme Court changed personnel doesn't mean they should get to change the law. We have a new city council. Don't be like the Supreme Court. Is the new council less concerned with putting low-income people within 3,200 feet of a refinery? Because that's also a huge statewide concern. Or is it a knee-jerk reaction to the lawsuit by the big bad developer? Before this project was rejected, it was clear that if the city approved the project, they'd be sued by the residents. And I respectfully disagree with Mr. Barrow. You can be sued by residents. I did it against the city of Los Angeles on a CEQA thing for the road diets, you may recall from a couple years ago, and we stopped them. If the city rejected the project, they'd be sued by the developer. Oh, but the developer is suing for $52 million. Do you know the difference between a lawsuit for $52 million and a lawsuit for $52? Anyone? Absolutely nothing. It's 6 zeros on a computer. That's the only difference. And by the way, I don't think you can even get money damages pursuant to a petition for writ of mandate, which is what they filed in writs and receivers court. This is a really bad idea for too many reasons to count. But the worst thing that this project's going to do is to change the entire complexity of this city, as many other people have indicated. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Dale?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good, it's great to hear everybody, and I am in full support of this beautiful project. I'm the one that left Manhattan Beach in '92. I lived there since '76 to '92. I left because of the concrete towers that got built. I heard somebody say that people with money wouldn't be moving into this, you know, the people with money. I have money. I've been retired, I have money, I got tons of money, and I could have bought the property that I was renting in '92. I chose not to because everybody was gonna take my view away if I bought that beautiful duplex. So I just laughed. I'm in Central California now, it's gorgeous up here. But what I wanna say is, people are hurting. 8 billion people are on this planet, and they need to live places. The people that would move into this would be the servers of the rich. And they would help to support the community. And to the person that leaves their house 7 days a week, that lives below Rosecrans and Highland, ride your bike, walk, or condense your errands. I don't see this being a problem, and I'm not trying to control you. I just think, really, 7 days a week you leave? So, one other point I want to make, because you've heard my spiel. When these concrete towers went up and took all of our views away and pushed renters right out the back door without a care in the world, what hasn't been discussed is the amount of garden parties and weekend parties that you all threw with your live bands and your brick walls and your beer drinking buddies, yucking it up. We want the city back. Please let the renters, the wonderful renters town. It's a gorgeous.
Thank you. I must have missed those parties. Debbie?
Yes, I think I missed those parties too. Where are they? Anyway, I'm a North Sand Section, resident and wrote and spoke against the project from the beginning. My main concerns, of course, were parking and traffic congestion here because it's just horrific, especially in the summertime. And mostly changing the small town character of the neighborhood and the town, and also the environmental concerns being next to Chevron. I really thought we'd settle this matter back in the fall, but it seems like fear of lawsuits brought this up again. I thought that we as a city decided it was worth the fight in court. We knew this was going to happen. I haven't seen anything new presented here other than the lawsuits that would change things to overturn the previous council's decision. There's been no change of circumstances. We always knew the lawsuits would follow and thought we had determined that it was worth the risk of fighting the lawsuits. We have a law firm that was willing to help pro bono or for reduced fees. We have smart, accomplished attorneys here in town and the city that can help with the legalities of this. I guess that this would be work for the city attorney and probably a lot more, but if this isn't worth fighting for, then what is? The staff earlier says that there's not a preponderance of evidence, new evidence, that there's a risk in developing, and then cites that tests were done by the owner. Well, surprise that the owner's test came back, no problem. That's a little bit like the fox in charge of the hen house, if you ask me. This is not about low-income housing. I would welcome some low-income housing, but the developer couldn't care less about providing low-income housing. Rather, they're exploiting the fact that they can use the small percentage of low-income units to build something without the usual procedures for building a monstrosity like this. Let's not change the character of this town. I can't believe that these lawsuits would, make you guys run off with your tails between your legs and all of a sudden overturn that decision. Please have some conviction and do the work to do what is best for the residents, but the integrity of the
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Zach?
Hello, this is Zach Dean. Thank you, Council. I'm a Manhattan Beach resident, and I have no financial connection to High Roads. I was surprised that the Council overruled both the city staff and the planning staff and the Planning Commission last October. I thought that denial was unwise back then, and I think it's unwise now. I know that some of the Council feel that these last-minute environmental issues are the city's best chance in court, but I just don't see those fooling anyone, least of all a court judge. The city's own housing element, voted on last year, identified this site for housing. So here's one of my concerns. Will this be the new normal? There will be more and more non-discretionary permits applications each year moving forward. My concern is that each one of these will need to be compelled by a court judge. This will not be a responsible use of taxpayer money. As the city planning staff has stated over and over again, this project is in compliance with all the city's own rules as determined by the density bonus. Councilmember Lesser, you campaigned on working with people and trying to find a common ground, both very reasonable principles. If this permit is denied, no one's going to trust the city again, and bypassing the city with state or federal law will become standard operating procedure. There will be no opportunity for middle ground or compromise, and that would be a real missed opportunity. The reason that housing is so expensive and the reason we're in a housing crisis in the state is because California has a shortage of 2 million homes, and it will remain expensive until we get serious about building more homes, both market rate and low income. I've been really disappointed by our local governments and what feels like a complete lack of seriousness and urgency about addressing our housing shortage. Denying this permit just feels like more of the same. Approving this permit would demonstrate that the city is taking its responsibility seriously to make sure that housing can be built as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, what's that? Rosalind?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, yes, I'm a resident of Manhattan Beach. I actually was in favor of High Rose. I'm in favor of finding housing for people. However, I'm starting to feel convinced that perhaps it is in a unsafe area, perhaps environmentally, but more testing has to be done. My real question is, could we be negotiating with the developer to put a similar development on Sepulveda or somewhere else in Manhattan Beach? I'm sort of disappointed that that corner of Manhattan Beach Boulevard and Sepulveda went to the Connecticut or one of the banks, and then also Sunrise is coming in Goat Hill when there's one just down the street, you know, a couple miles in Hermosa. Housing there for you know, lower cost housing would have been a great idea. So I'm not sure if this sounds naive, but if it's possible to renegotiate with this developer and make sure I'm not against anyone making money or, you know, doing what they need to do and for our city to continue to grow. Things change, you know, it's the 21st century, so I think we have to accept the fact that we need more housing. So thanks, and you know, I'm hoping that the best turns out, because it's a shame to have so much bad feelings between all of us who live here. That's it.
Thank you. Jan?
Good evening, Jan Carl here. I want to basically double down on what Ed McPherson and Debbie Van Ness both said, so I don't need to reiterate a lot of it. But the fact of the matter is, what this person said earlier about the servants of Manhattan Beach being able to live in this development, are we joking here? Do you know what the rents are going to be? Those are not for people who are serving the city of Manhattan Beach. So we go back to the fact again, what is truly affordable? And there are many places where we could build housing that would be truly much more affordable for people who could still get here within 10 minutes. And again, there's no reason for us to approve anything that has this kind of a situation for traffic and the lack of parking. Thank you.
Thank you. With Mr. Schindel? Yes. Mr. Schindel? Are you there? Ron, can you hear us? Blink twice if you're okay.
We also have the other of Highland, George Bertoldias, that wants to.
Okay. Mr. Bordocas?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You have, as an appellant, you have up to 10 minutes.
I don't think I'll need that much,
That's what Mr. Burton said.
Yeah, well, anyway, we'll go on. As you know, I've been opposed to this project, appealed it the first time, the second time at council. You know, we've been told that this is for affordable housing. And as many of the other speakers have also stated much more eloquently than I can, it certainly is not. It provides 6 units out of 79, which will be 512 square feet, and probably will be facing the wall that blocks the tanks. But in any case, the other ones will all be 73 units, luxury units, with a penthouse on the 4th floor. We asked, I don't have a problem with affordable housing. As I've stated before, I don't think this does anything really for affordable housing, as it's only 6 units. And it's really just a great profit machine for, you know, it's a windfall for the developer to maneuver through the regulations that other developers in our town would have to put up with, but not because they qualify with affordable housing of 6 units, they get around all that. You guys all know all that. Also, does it really do anything for the community? No. And as you stated, Mayor Napolitano, when you voted against this, it's got nothing to do with the character. Just, obviously we care about the character. It's got nothing to do with it being not being under AB 2011, because AB 2011 is not in force. But there was a reason AB 2011 was signed, and I think probably, as many other people have stated, that building housing, especially affordable housing, right next to a refinery, which 9 boring holes in an acre, obviously has been given so much credit as to identifying any possible problems with that. That's 9 holes of whatever size they might be. It doesn't seem like it's enough. But so we're going to put these people at risk. We're going to risk our community, and we're not even really addressing why AB 2011 was done. Sure, it doesn't affect this project when it was filed, but you can't just ignore that, can you? Can you just slide this in and then worry about the possible risks to the tenants and to the city? And one question that wasn't really answered. Okay, so they start digging, right? And so they find something. And then the developer abandons the project and says, we don't have any money. We can't mitigate this. We can't fix this. Nobody answered what happens. They just said they would be responsible. They would be responsible means nothing. If they walk away and go bankrupt and bankrupt the LLC, who's responsible? We are. We're going to be stuck with it. We're going to be stuck with that. In my view, and I think maybe you guys will look into that, we're going to be stuck with that liability, not the developer. And who are you going to sue? The LLC, which is now bankrupt and liquidated? I don't know. It seems to me that we all want affordable housing. This isn't the way to do it. This isn't affordable housing. It isn't doing anything. It's optics for the state of California. It shows that they're trying to do something about affordable housing. But all it is it's a big scam, and at the same time, it's trampling our rights as a community, our rights to have our voices heard. And I think the attorney said that, in their opinion, that it violates due process and violates the 14th Amendment, which supersedes state law. We are protected by equal protection under the law and also a due process. We have that right. And if these guys want to sue us, let them come sue us, because other cities in this state are going to be ruined by these people. We don't want Miami in Manhattan Beach. Redondo Beach, I kind of like Redondo Beach, but they don't have the huge building. But we don't want Miami here. We don't want towers of 10 and 15 stories because the state needs to show that they're doing something, and they're not really doing anything. We have a responsibility for over 400 units. This is 6. This is a joke. This is a scam. This is bullying. This is intimidation. This is, as the person before mentioned, the guy's suing for $52 million. He paid $15 million for that property. How much has he invested? Maybe another 5? Okay, and so anyway, I hope you guys stay strong. I hope we vote this down. I hope that we can protect our town, because it is a beach community. And also, the developer came here to build here because he could make a lot of money. And I don't blame him, because he's trying to take advantage of the law. But at the same time, it's within our rights to protect our town, to protect our community, and not let this happen. And also protect the coastal towns like us. Because I gotta tell you, you know why people come to California? It's not because of just Disneyland. They come because of the coastal communities. And we have one of the best coastal communities on the coast. And this is going to cause people to leave. This is going to erode our tax base. This is going to erode our quality of life here. And people are just going to say, you know something? I didn't come here and work hard. Nobody gave me the house I lived in. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning for the last 40 years to make the money that I make to live here. And so did other people, and other people invested earlier than that, and it was expensive for them back then. And then to have these people come in, the state, tell us what we should do in our community and totally trample on us and our rights, I just think it's wrong, and we should stand up against them. And, you know, come on, let's do it. Let's do it for the state, not just for our town, but for other towns in our state. Thank you very much, and I hope you vote no. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's try Mr. Chanel again.
All right, can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can.
Finally, I had to switch computers. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, this project is extremely unpopular. You've heard a whole bunch of comments, you've gotten emails, you all know how unpopular it is. The question is the legality. And Steve, I think you hit the nail on the head last time. Even though the new law takes effect this January 1st, does not apply to this project, the basis for that law does apply, and it provides the proper rationale as to why a CEQA should be required. There's your legal basis right there. Also, it's been shown that they can build 79 units without a height waiver. You know, it's unquestionable. So, you know, there's that. And as far as the environmental specific consideration, there's a 16-inch oil pipeline that parallels the property line going through the Chevron parking lot within several feet. That might not be a concern for normal construction, but if you go subterranean with the parking and you got this 16-inch pipeline full of oil right next to it, first earthquake is going to be a disaster. And we have earthquakes. I mean, we haven't had one for a while, but you know what? Everybody knows it's coming. I'm not talking about doomsday or anything, but it doesn't take much of an earthquake to move things around, and this whole pipeline could easily fracture, and you'd have oil all over this development, people running around. I mean, and that doesn't even talk about the bogus traffic study. I mean, everybody who lives in the area knows that traffic study is bogus, if not downright fraud. I mean, the idea that you have less traffic during rush hour in the evening with residential area than you would with business is just absurd on the face of it. And, you know, these people should be held to task. I'm rambling now, and I apologize. I just, you have new council members, and so I don't know what their views are, but they weren't here for the previous meetings where just so many dissatisfied citizens unhappy about the fact that it's even up for consideration. And I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Who? Lucia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Lucia. 2 minutes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Lucia Rabatins. I'm a resident of Manhattan Beach. And I would like to join Debbie and all the other people who have expressed concern for this project. Ideologically, I am in favor of density and I'm in favor of affordable housing. And I think that that's something that the city of Manhattan Beach has to consider. In the guidelines provided by the LA County consultant that you hired 5 years ago, affordable housing should be directed towards the population that is more at risk of homelessness in Manhattan Beach, who are our seniors. So projects like Sunrise go in that direction. but in this case, nothing has changed to justify a different position of the city council compared to what you already have decided. And I'm confident that you will confirm that decision because the legal analysis has not changed. It just happened what they told you that would have happened, which is they threatened a lawsuit, but that doesn't, the equation and the consideration of all the legal risks remains the same. So I hope you confirm your previous decision and do not give your approval for this project or condition your approval to a full evaluation of the environmental risks. Thanks.
Thank you. Heather?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, hi. How can the city council simply rush to reverse itself without giving the appellants who actually won an opportunity to respond? You are denying the appellants and the people affected by this without the due process of law. You're still worried about getting sued by the greedy developer and its cronies that you have forgotten the residents. Stand firm and the residents will be behind you. And let's be clear that this whole thing has been a sham to create a short-term rental hotel. So, Mr. City Attorney, are you going to give us a formal legal opinion on this? I firmly oppose the high-risk development. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else in Zoom. We'll turn back to the audience here. Anyone who hasn't spoken, who wants to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to offering a rebuttal to the applicant, up to 5 minutes. Observe and report.
Mayor Napolitano, members of the City Council, Michael Schonefeld here again. I just want to reiterate that we feel that these comments have been raised in the past, and I think we've responded to them in the record in the past. I did want to sort of register just an objection to any move during these proceedings to impose any conditions that are more onerous than the ones that have already been presented, you know, in the resolution and the packets. I think the HCD's direction was pretty clear to rescind and to approve. You know, the Housing Accountability Act applies not just to denials, but also to conditions of approval in an approved project that render a project infeasible. So bear that in mind, and also to any conditions that would reduce densities beyond those proposed. Our hope here, again, we were sort of, I guess, here without, you know, in an anomalous situation of being in court against you right now in Judge Strobel's department. But our request here is hew to the line of what the HCD asked, and again, we would register objections blanket-wise to any restrictions that are imposed above and beyond those that were considered in the prior proceedings. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And I'm here for questions.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Council questions. Any questions for anybody?
Mayor, as the council members are going through some notes, I have a few answers to some of the questions.
Okay.
Or at least the points that were raised by, well, two appellants at least, and maybe a few others, some of the people, the members of the public.
Why don't you go ahead now, so that might answer any questions,
Yes.
Councilor.
So let's go back. Andrew Ryan is one of the appellants, and he claims he didn't receive notice. And it was actually brought up by the last speaker as well, or the prior speaker. We sent him a personal email on January 9th, 10 days ago, to let him know about this meeting. And so he got more notice than what's required under law. And all the appellants got that notice. And some of the appellants took advantage of it and came here and spoke on Zoom. So perhaps he will claim he never saw that email, but we've got a record of it. So that's number one. Mark Burton has once again raised a number of CEQA issues, and the prior staff reports adequately addressed those issues, but I'm going to do a little recap of that and then focus on one final issue that he brought up tonight. So all the staff reports have explained why this is ministerial, and it's not just state law. There are two different aspects of state law, but it's our own housing element and our local coastal program that was adopted in 2013. In connection with the rezoning of this property to allow mixed use back in 1992, and this was one of the slides, there was a neg deck, which is for the benefit of the public. A negative declaration is that the city has fully analyzed that rezoning and determined that there are no environmental impacts of allowing residential at that site. Now, one of the earlier emails from Mr. Burton, well, Chevron is a changed circumstance, but that's not true, because as we all know, Chevron's been there for about 100 years. So that was the first time this site, among others, having residential uses there, was analyzed under CEQA. The second time was in 2013 in connection with the housing element, specifically with respect to this program that allows the non-discretionary ministerial approvals of these type of projects. And that was included, and that was actually, but back in 92, that was actually certified by the Coastal Commission. The housing element was certified by HCD back in 2013. So we've had 2 stages of environmental review about residential uses at that property. Coming forward, back to the ministerial aspect, and I'm just repeating myself, but sometimes I do that. Our housing element says it's ministerial. Our local coastal program says it's ministerial. You know, Mr. Burton has referred to the Glendale case, but we addressed that over the summer. That doesn't apply. In fact, it supports our position, because the Glendale case states it's up to the local jurisdiction to determine whether it's ministerial or not. And in this case, the city did this back in 2013. So that's the CEQA issues, but there's a lot more to it, but I think the public's heard this, and there's so much in the record on this very issue. I don't want to go any further on that. So I've covered that, and then the San Mateo case. There was some. One of the appellants brought up the constitutional issues. In fact, I think the professor back at the last proceeding brought up. He claimed there was a substantive due process issue under the federal government, and also claimed that the density bonus laws are unconstitutional. I'm not sure if he focused on the HAA at that time.
This is by letter, though. He wasn't actually present.
That's true. So his letter stated that it's unconstitutional. Well, San Mateo, in the San Mateo case, which is cited in the staff report, and there's a little description of it, the same precise claims based on the Constitution that somehow the residents' due process was violated, or that the HAA violated due process, was rejected by the Court of Appeal. So I think those are the 3 main issues. Oh, finally back to Mark Burton. The one thing that he did add was the some people call it the social justice, or there's some term for it that I'm not familiar with, but his quote was something like, the state did not intend to subject poor people to a ministerial process, or subject them to something along those lines. I don't want to misquote him. But he's correct. There's no blanket exemption in CEQA reserved for low-income housing. That's not the point of this proceeding. The point of this proceeding is that there's nothing in CEQA that says if it's affordable, you just don't have to do any type of environmental review. It's with respect to what the city has done back in 2013 in conjunction with the state housing laws, and that's why it's ministerial. So those are the big items that I thought needed to be addressed, and I'm open for other questions.
Okay. Councilmember Haworth?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. City Attorney, so here's a question. Legally, would there have been a way for us to say, yeah, this isn't a ministerial case, it is discretionary?
It's kind of an open-ended question. Back in 2013, at that time, you could have said it's not going to be ministerial.
But since that housing element, then we couldn't.
Right, because the general plan is basically your constitution for the city, and to get it certified by the state, you'd have to try to amend that and going forward. But based on our most recent discussions with HCD about the present housing element, they actually want more ministerial projects for housing.
Right. I mean, we've already kind of covered that 2013 decision was in conjunction with state law.
Yes.
So because that is in there, legally, we really couldn't have declared it as discretionary at this
time, no. It'd be inconsistent with your general plan.
So even though, let's say it was discretionary, many people have commented, and I understand, I totally understand, but calling it a low-income housing project, it's not necessarily a low-income housing project. It's got 6 units, 8 units? 6 units, right? So I think that's something, I don't know, it's a technical thing, but I think it's important that we are very clear. And there was also a comment made about, the oil tanks at Chevron are a risk to the people, the low-income people. But again, even if it was discretionary, CEQA doesn't look at the outside impacts to the project. It's the project to the surrounding community, correct?
Well, so there are certain aspects of CEQA that could look at that.
Okay.
But it's the HAA, it's the Housing Accountability Act that says these specific adverse impacts have to be coming from the project.
Okay.
For instance, you build residential housing, or residential housing is not going to create fires, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So you cannot attribute what happens at Chevron
to the project.
The project. It's not an element of the project.
Okay. And I'm sorry, is it okay if I have one more question?
Question?
It's so very technical, and it's,
Ask the question.
Thank you. It's also been raised that, of course, there's a significant impact to this project has significant impact, but that's a very technical term, right, for staff. So when it was filed with staff, and staff said, no, there's no significant impact, it's a very technical term. It's not like staff could say, or I could say, well, it's near, the refinery, there could be stuff in the ground, maybe we shouldn't. We would have to be able to prove that ahead of time, or?
Yes, and I think the way to phrase it, and I realize it's complex, because it's such a tough standard. And we've looked at this for 2 years now, and it's very difficult to meet that standard. There has to be some type of project that creates this adverse specific impact that was identified at the time that they submitted their application, step one, which cannot be mitigated.
Which cannot be mitigated,
and as we mentioned before, people build on Superfund sites. It costs a lot of money. I'm not saying this is a Superfund site, because I know it's not, but
right.
It's, look at other cities. I don't want to mention certain cities, but there's a lot of things that have been built on Superfund sites. So in other words, they were actually mitigated so you could build there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more? Questions? Councilmember Haworth?
No, oh, I'm sorry, I was.
Councilmember Lesser?
Wanted to follow up on that exchange. Heard from members of the public requesting a proper environmental study. 2 CEQA studies were done on this parcel. To the extent separate and apart from the discretion issue and the ministerial nature of this review, what would a more comprehensive study include to the extent that there were concerns of how the Chevron refinery were impacting this property, and in what context might that have been required?
Well, I mean, it is a lot of speculation, but there's a checklist under EIR, and there's certain different, like disturbing Native American. I'm going to turn to staff because they know more about the checklist, but you got to go through, and perhaps in this particular case it would be contaminated soil, which, once again, if you do a phase 1 and phase 2, and they say it's clean, you can rely on that. And then the next step is during construction, if for some reason they missed, and with all their borings, that there is some contamination, it gets cured at that time.
Correct. And so CEQA would have looked at the impact of the project on biological resources. In this case, this is a previously developed site. It would have looked at impact on hydrology, and there's a long list. But in terms of the impact, I believe your question was the impact of Chevron on the project. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct, because I think that's what we're hearing of many of the concerns.
That's correct. And generally, CEQA would, as we mentioned before, evaluate the impact of the project on the environment, not of the existing built environment on the future residents of the project.
Okay. Is there any context in which it would be relevant to evaluate the concerns about the refinery's impact on the units that are proposed for that site?
There isn't. This happens in areas where you, for example, you have a freeway that runs through a city, and within certain 100 feet, you propose a certain type of development, and typically you would do a health risk assessment and consider if there are additional measures that should be taken to protect the users of that site, whether it's filtration systems or inoperable windows in certain locations, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Another question for the city attorney. He was mentioning in passing in one of the comments, and actually there are a number of email communications related to the issue of this project serving as a precedent for other projects of a similar scale. To what extent is that a true statement?
That's actually been brought up earlier. Yes. There's no precedent. If this gets approved tonight, that doesn't have any precedent on any other parcel in the city for lots of reasons. I don't know if it's reassuring, but this has been on the books since 2013. This is the first project. It's similar to the SB 9 issues that were of considerable concern last year that people were going to be able to subdivide their single-family houses into 4 units. And at that time, the community development director did an analysis of the city and said that can only happen in about 3% of the city. But also, we haven't received any SB 9 applications. So back to precedent, there's no precedent. What the precedent is state law in our housing element. So whatever it happens on this property is not going to make it have any influence on other properties.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Franklin?
Okay. Got to think about how to frame this question, but if you could just give me the background again on, in 1992, there was a multi-use, I'm sorry, mixed-use project that was being considered.
Now let me bring this, let's clarify that. At the time that the city was doing their, or maybe it was amendment, and Tallene can talk about, but it was the LCP. And at 1992 is when the city first enacted an amendment to the LCP, which is the Local Coastal Program, to allow mixed uses on a number of properties in the city, including that site.
So it was the adoption of the local coastal program's zoning implementation program. And so the local coastal program is essentially the equivalent of the general plan for our coastal zone, and the implementation program is the equivalent of our zoning code for the coastal zone. And anytime, as you're aware, that you adopt any sort of policy that is accompanied by a CEQA evaluation. And so in 1992, the city did adopt the implementation program, which was the zoning code for the coastal zone. And at that time, we did accompany that with a CEQA evaluation and presented a neg deck as part of the adoption of that. And then subsequently, when we prepared the housing element in 2013, there was also CEQA done as a negative declaration on that effort as well. So in 1992, in introducing the zoning, that's when the C&E zone was developed, and the C&E zone historically has allowed for mixed uses on a site, including this site. So not just this site, but all other C&E zone properties.
Okay, so basically there was and to try to decant that, there was an environmental review and it passed. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Right.
Pursuant to CEQA, correct.
So this is what kind of concerned me. You know, that was 1992. That's 30 years ago, 31 years ago. As we might imagine, the refinery industry is undergoing significant changes. There's a decrease in demand, and so I was just doing some research here because I had read about this before, but they're producing a whole nother class of petrochemicals. You know, it's not just refining oil for gasoline. There's other petrochemicals that are being produced to the tune of almost about 40 to 50% of the output at that refinery. So in 1992, we would not have analyzed the impact of those petrochemicals being produced from the refinery. So I don't know if we have any refinery experts here, but that's just a little bit of a cause of concern that, you know, there's other things that are, you know, the industry has evolved. We don't know about these things that are being produced there. I don't even know if Chevron, you know, produces them, but.
Let's go back to questions.
So that's my question. My question is, you know, that may not be valid because there might be the production of different products at the refinery now.
Again, I'll reiterate that the environmental site assessment, the two-phased environmental site assessment that was prepared was the latest one was in 2020. So those are more current.
But that's that was the
subsurface,
boring, right?
correct.
That was the what's in the ground. This would be what's in the air and what they're producing.
But even again under CEQA, we would evaluate the construction and operational impacts of the project on the existing environment. And under CEQA, we wouldn't evaluate the impact, the emissions from Chevron on the future or existing residents of the city.
Is there anything that does? I mean, that seems to be pretty important.
A health risk assessment.
Okay. And is that waived with the ministerial?
That would be, so cities typically that require health risk assessments as a part of their review process, it's either whether it's through their zoning code or their general plan, that would apply to all projects near the Chevron refinery, whether it was a single family residential project or a multifamily residential project or a commercial development. In this case, we don't require that.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Honor. With almost 2 hours of comments, I want to make sure my question for the city attorney is more of a confirmation. City Attorney Barrow, just two things. Confirm that the short-term rental restrictions will be addressed in a covenant going forward if and when council approves. And second, the focus specific adverse impact is on the proposed project, not on Chevron.
Yes. And back the days when Councilmember Lesser was here, I used to answer those questions just yes, and then go back. So,
True.
yes and yes.
Thank you. Nothing further this time, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Council, I would also like to just add to the record that we confirmed that the EPA would clean up if there was an orphan site.
All right, any other questions from council? All right, seeing none, we will take a dramatic pause then, and we've been at it here for 2.5 hours. We'll take a 10-minute recess and come back and to council discussion. Actually, before we take that recess, we're going to close the public testimony portion, and now we'll take the recess. Oh. Okay, we're back and we're live. If you can take your seats, any conversations, please take them out to the lobby. Appreciate that. Otherwise, it is now time for council deliberation. And I'm watching everyone push their buttons at once. Giving it serious thought. Councilman Franklin.
I was going to say the rookie goes first, but not really the rookie.
Nope.
At least this last term. So as my opening statement, I said I would look at everything that was provided in this proceeding. Fundamentally, there is nothing that I see that would make me change my opinion and vote, from before.
Okay. All right. Other speakers?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery, you're saved by the
Thank you, Your Honor.
the MPT.
Let me start here. I've got a few things to say. Besides keeping an open mind for any new information we might have heard or new ideas, I see no need to add too much to what I said on October 18th, 22. Except clarification. There's no more wishful thinking. Realities set in. Election's over. We've now been sued by the developers in court. It's not a matter of if anymore. We're there. Let's make that clear. And secondarily, someone brought up, I can't believe they said this, that they thought that our city attorney and his team were not experienced. That they don't have experience in land use law. They're absolutely incorrect. They have fantastic, experienced city law firm with well-qualified land use attorneys that have researched every scenario. So I'm going to put that comment to bed right there. That's over. Stop going down that road. Another thing, this is not a city project. We didn't bring this forward, folks. This is a private development. If the council approves this, the developer will identify the city, which means the city had no risk of money, loss, and future litigation. Make that clear too. This is not an and or. This is either or. And to the people that said, well, there's no reason or we should fight this all the way to the end, and other councilors said that previously, well, you know what, folks? Here's the facts, and most everybody knows this. California courts of appeal have strengthened the density bonus law when it was put place in 1979. This is not a new law. It did not just pop up on us out of the blue. It's been there 43 years. So you're trying to send a message to Sacramento. Who are you going to send a message to? There's no one there to answer to it. This is on us. This is the state. You don't like it? I don't like it. This is not my first choice of a project on that property at all. I'd rather see, a low impact high-end hotel there, some retail use. Absolutely. That direction I want to go. But this is a very simple decision. And for those of you that think, well, we'll fight as long as we can and save our community. So the argument to me is you'd rather risk 52 million of exposure, maybe the number's going to be less. Then you're going to realize, hey folks, you got to spend money on our attorneys, whatever firm defends us, and then other attorneys on the other side if we lose. And to that point, no city, no county, no group or person has won in California courts against the state on the density bonus law. Not one. So you want to waive all that money away and take a chance? No. In my mind, that's not risk $50 million that could be spent on police or fire or roads or the Scout House Community Center. You'd rather risk all that money? And then on top of that, you just said yes to the first part. What about the loss of permit control? Someone made the comment, oh, it's just a, that's just not really a real threat to the state. Really? You take that risk yourself for the rest of the city? No, not all residents agree that this is a bad decision, that this is a bad project for our city. Yes, 730 emails. The planning department, Ted said, 730 emails. And you're telling me all 730 were against it? Well, that means there's 13,000 other residents plus and voters that are not, that support this project. So I want to make it clear, my decision hasn't changed. I still think it's the right thing to do. It is not my first choice of project, but being where we're at, what our choices that remain, I'll make it clear. I'm not going to risk the money. I'm not going to risk what would happen to our city losing the control of our permit process. And I will make the motion, Your Honor, to say yes to item 23-0038 and approve the application. That is my motion.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Haworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to reiterate, somebody made an assertion, I can't remember if it's on Zoom or in person, that we're hearing this because there's new council members, and that's just not true. That would mean that I or David had requested that this come up again, and that's not the case. You know, we're hearing it because of the actual lawsuit and the letter from the state, and it was a council decision to bring this back. And I have to thank everyone here tonight, as well as those who spoke at prior council meetings and the Planning Commission, those who've emailed this council and prior councils. I've actually, I have read, I know all of us have, by the way, I've read all the emails. In an abundance of caution, I haven't replied. So many of you have sent me emails and thought, well, great, is she reading them? I am reading them, but it's, you know, there's a lot of legalities here. And so in an abundance of caution, I didn't reply, or if I did, I said thanks. And I know that can be frustrating. And one of the things that, it's sort of my MO, even before when I was on council, that if you emailed me to say, give an opinion on an agenda item, I would not let you know if I agreed with you or not before the meeting, because I would want to hear from anyone who spoke in the public, right? And I would want to hear from my colleagues. So I, just so you know, even if I were to reply to you, I would not say, great point, I agree with you, or I disagree with you. I'll never do that. That denies the public, that denies me the benefit of hearing from the whole public. So that's just something to say. So, and I've also met with residents, and as was mentioned, there was a campaign, and all we did was meet with residents, and we all talked about High Rose. We talked a lot. And I've met with residents post-campaign, residents on both sides. And everybody has raised really important points and helpful questions, and I've sought answers to your questions from legal counsel, and I'm really satisfied with that advice. And I'm not here to argue with you about the project itself. I hear you. I hear, you know, especially the people who live in that area. It's going to intensify the use of your neighborhood, traffic especially, right? And you know, it is nightmare. Thank you. I had that written down, but I am not belittling or dismissing those concerns, and perhaps there's some ways that we can work with traffic engineers to do something. We should be doing it now if what Mr. Arvizo is saying is true. So I'm not here to argue about those things, and I appreciate those concerns, but you know, even with the environmental concerns, there has been a lot of assertions raised that, you know, Chevron will impact the residents, Chevron this, Chevron that, and we've heard that CEQA is about the project itself. We've also heard that the developer must comply with, or property owner must comply with federal, state, and local environmental and public health regulations. We've got confirmation from our interim planning director that if there's an environmental problem and the developer defaults and leaves, the EPA has to clean it up. We are caring about the health of the residents. So many people in this community have offered to help with the legal battle. So many smart people have offered legal advice and strategies to consider, and I personally have considered them all and sought other opinions and how does this play out. I've explored every good faith legal option, alternative, and possible path because of the impact it's going to have on the residents who live there. And I'm focusing on traffic because that's always a huge quality of life issue. So, but I'm not here to challenge those. I'm not here to challenge those legal opinions and a strategy because I have received legal advice, you know, through our attorneys, et cetera. And I am completely satisfied that the city has fully complied with CEQA and our own local regulations in determining that the project is a ministerial project. I am completely convinced of that. So, after saying all that, there is no legal basis for me to deny this project. And I listened tonight. You know, obviously I've typed out some notes, but I have here for my own, you know, note, unless something new is presented tonight, you know, because I was being open as well. I really wanted to find a way, in a way, because of the impact. I was really excited in October when Mayor Napolitano's reason for voting to deny the project, air quality, I thought that that was a really clever idea, and I was hopeful that that reasoning was sound. I thought that was really smart, and I said so on social media. But the letters from the state indicate that that reasoning is not defensible. So because of that decision to deny the project, as Mayor Pro Tem, or MPT, I guess we call him now, Montgomery mentioned, that we're already facing lawsuits, it's not a threat, and action by the state. So it's no longer a theoretical question. We now have 3 lawsuits challenging the city's denial that have been filed. And the city's housing element is under review by the state. So I can't, in good conscience, make a decision, although I am holding my nose, that exposes the city to a protracted and wildly expensive legal fight. We will not win it. And I can't give the state a reason not to approve our housing element, which is there at the state right now, waiting to be approved, because that's going to take away, as MPT mentioned, our ability to enforce our own zoning. So talk about losing local control. All bets are off then. So I'm holding my nose because I'm following the law. And I feel that I am preventing an even worse fate for this city. And that is my position. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Lesser?
You don't want to go first, Mayor? Just checking.
Sorry, it's not funny.
Mayor's prerogative, go last.
I share the concerns of the opponents of this project. My wife and I used to live blocks from the proposed project site. We used to look at the fires. We used to clean up the soot that would accumulate throughout the year. In my 15 years previous to this service on council, I actively advocated for smaller scale residential development. I served on the Mansionization Committee that revised our codes to make residential properties smaller. I served on the Parking Public Improvements Commission, looking at how we address traffic issues. This was my route. I used to drive to Century City up this as my daily route, and it was a cluster years ago, and it is every bit a cluster today. The idea of this large-scale property going there is agonizing. I also share the cynicism that many have of how the bonus density law is being used here. For 6 smaller units, get to build an apartment with 79 units and circumvent our city's code. We as a city want to be part of the solution to address the statewide crisis of housing. This is a small step, but this sure doesn't seem like the most effective way to try and achieve that. The challenge is separating what we would like the law to be from what it is in fact. The state has dislodged local jurisdictions like us from the ability to entitle projects just like this. You've heard, we do not have discretion on this project. The state's gone a step further over the last 5 years. They have weaponized the state law such that there is huge liability and new equitable remedies, not just to developers, but to third-party organizations that can bring their own suits and get legal fees for their lawyers, as all to boot. There's also an Attorney General strike force that's looking for cases like this, and in similar ones has injected itself into the action and forced cities to move forward. So many in the community are saying, this is the time we should stand up. Prior councils stood up for the rights of the community. Where are you? Well, I can say for myself, along with our Mayor Pro Tem, along with Councilmember Howarth, we were on the council that appealed all the way to the California Supreme Court, our plastic bag ban, for example. I served with 3 other members on this council, including the mayor, when we took on another jurisdiction, the city of Los Angeles, with regard to its road diet outside of our borders. We've taken on multiple cases against the state. I have been proud to be on those fights. This is different. The housing issues that we're dealing with here are different than those types of cases. As was articulated, we have challenges in our ability to prevail with enormous liability. While we're dealing with issues on a day-to-day with our ability to have enough police officers on our streets, to have funding for so many projects that our community wants. I am not in favor of this project, but like Councilmember Howarth, I'm looking at the realities of how the cases have interpreted these types of actions that have been brought against cities like ours for similar reasons, and I do not see an easy way forward. I could say more. I think I would say that this is an example of why the removal of local communities from the ability to participate in the discretion over projects in their own community is so terrible. One size does not fit all. I can imagine if our community was involved in an entitled process for this project, it could be lowered in height, it could be lowered in massing, and there could be far more support for it than there clearly is. But under the circumstances, under the state law, I see myself as having no other choice other than to support this project for the benefit of our community and its residents because of this significant liability that we face if we don't.
Okay, thank you. I'll jump in, and apologies ahead of time if this sounds like free association, mainly because I probably would have written down some notes, as some of my colleagues have, except I read in the complaint filed by the applicant that showed bias or predisposition for having notes written at the last hearing on this when it was denied. I wrote those notes an hour beforehand and made adjustments along the way after we had heard substantial testimony from the applicant and the appellants at the hearing before that. And so I still kept an open mind then. I'm keeping an open mind now, and I took notes along the way to get to where I am right now. And you know, I appreciate all that's been said tonight. It's been an interesting journey, to be sure. I understand that my vote at the last meeting where this was decided upon took some people by surprise. If you've been aware of my votes and my own journey on council for the 5 terms I've served, you shouldn't have been surprised. I also read later that it was politically motivated, all these things, all the conspiracy theorists and folks who have extra time on Nextdoor certainly were theorizing about why I did what I did. And the simple fact is, I looked at things, I wasn't trying to be clever about anything. I looked at things, I took general and specific concerns about this project. I did not vote against it at the time because of anything that my colleagues said or didn't say, and I didn't find a lot of value either in the arguments by the appellants at that time, because they did not address the narrow legal path that is available in this instance. And it's laid out, it's put together again a bit simply in the supplemental memo. You can only deny if the housing development project as proposed would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety, and there's no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid that specific adverse impact. And I heard from some folks too regarding Chevron, and they've been a focal point in this discussion. And I want to make clear that nothing I said before or will say tonight is a knock on Chevron. Chevron is a very responsible corporate citizen that has been a great corporate partner here in Manhattan Beach, and they do a very necessary service and provide a very necessary product to us and to folks all over California. And they do it in a very highly regulated industry, and they know very well that if there's one blip of smoke or one drop of oil that goes the wrong way, that they've got several local, state, and federal agencies breathing down their necks. So, that said, there are certain inconvenient truths about such facilities, and putting residential housing next to such facilities. And we've talked about what the impacts are in the application of CEQA, and it's not Chevron's impacts on the project, but the project's impact on its environment. But it does have a specific impact, and there's an adverse impact in the placement of a residential project with long-term residents, not transient residents, not a hotel, not short-term rentals, but there's a problem with putting that there. Now, the city did that, and we agreed to zone it that way, but would we do, if we knew then what we know now, would we still do that? And I don't think so. And I think in looking at that, the risks are well known as far as, and I was dinged in the complaint that, I didn't cite some of the housing advocates, I didn't cite certain this. I talked about AB 2011, not for the fact that the law itself applied in this case, but that the reason that the 3,200 foot buffer was included is supported by scientific studies. And there are a number of studies. In fact, it's not hard. I incorporated things by reference because frankly, for brevity, I didn't think there was a question that there were studies that showed that, because I've read them before, other people have read them. A 2020 study in the National Library by the National Library of Medicine says statistically significant increased risk of all types of cancer for those living close to an oil refinery. A 2022 Yale study said there's an increased risk of stroke for folks who live close to in close proximity to a refinery. There have been statements made by the National Hispanic Medical Association, the NAACP. University of Texas did a recent study and found a clear connection between the distance people live from a refinery and the increased rate of all cancer types. And then going back to 2005, the California Air Resources Air Quality Board said in their land use handbook, they recommended avoiding siting new sensitive land uses near refineries, and long-term residential is a sensitive use. So, I think there's plenty there to consider, and that doesn't mean, though, and that's why I want to be specific to this project, because it doesn't mean that Manhattan Beach is against affordable housing or against additional housing. We have adopted, or we approved, it hasn't been certified yet because they're holding us hostage to it. we've approved the sixth cycle housing element that includes over 700 new housing units that we will be zoning for, as we're required to do under the RENA numbers that were allotted to us. And in fact, we just did approve another density bonus project on Artesia. It wasn't appealed, and it has affordable housing in it, and it took some waivers and is exceeding the local zoning requirements. And we didn't appeal that because, again, different circumstances here. You know, could certainly go on, but I respect everything that's been said about this. There's no perfect decision that's going to be made here. Everyone's voting for what they feel is best for the community. I don't dispute the issues with the lawsuits, the potential loss, and I expect that the applicant will not withdraw the lawsuit even if this is approved. And I'm just going to assume that they're going to go for some sorts of damages or attorney's fees for the fact that this was delayed in their minds. You know, the legislature and the state certainly want to force the hands of local government, and that's fine, but they can't have it both ways as far as I'm concerned. They can't say that there's an appeal process, but you have no discretion. That's a contradiction. And if the legislature and the Housing and Community Development Department want to have these projects, then pass a law that says that there are no more appeals of these things. So we can skip all this drama, and they can just take over our local zoning or local housing in regards to these projects. They haven't done that. They allowed for this appeal to happen. The law allows for this appeal to happen. And that in itself is discretion. Decisions can be made. And I understand that folks think that hands are tied or falling there. And again, while I disagree with that conclusion, I respect the fact that you have, and for the reasons that you have. And with that, there is a motion. I didn't see a second. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Holworth.
Yes, so Mayor, I'm going to restate the motion. It was to adopt resolution number 23-0014, which repeals resolution number 22-0124 and affirms the decision of the Planning Commission to approve the project.
Okay. There's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery, seconded by Councilmember Holworth. Because Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery is off-site, we're going to do a voice vote. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Franklin?
No.
Councilmember Holworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Reluctantly, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor Napolitano?
No.
Motion passes 3-2.
Okay. With that, we will move to adjourn, and we will adjourn to, when are we adjourning to? Next regular meeting, February 7th, 6 p.m. Thank you all for coming down and participating. Appreciate that.